podcast role. Welcome in.
Welcome to the SENIA Happy Hour podcast with your host, Lori Boll. We know you're busy, so we bring you 1 hour's worth of content in under 30 minutes, leaving you time for a true happy hour.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm speaking with April Remfrey, who is SENIA's Director of Standards. Standards, you say? Well, yes. SENIA International has just released our standards. Excuse me. And April is here to share all about them. Welcome, April.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here. You have been our kind of head of this since, well, you came up with the idea many years ago. So let's begin with the why. Why did you see a need for this? Why did SENIA decide that schools needed these disability inclusion standards?
Well, that's kind of why we do everything, right? There's got to be a reason, there's got to be a why, and SENIA's always had this big five, right? The 5 things that they're really focusing on, and it's been around providing learning opportunities for professionals and families, and then the global network that is SENIA, which is, thousands and thousands of people at this point. And it became really obvious that we were having a hard time communicating with each other because someone was talking about one thing and using one word for it, and another person thought they were talking about the same thing and using a different word for it, and wires were getting crossed all over the place. And that was one of the places where it started, was the language wasn't the same. It wasn't consistent. And then we started seeing the research about, especially from like international schools research, talking about the fact that there are over 15,000 international schools now, which serves over 7.1 million students. And what that meant was we were trying to support, as an organization, a lot of different people in a lot of different places, and we needed a collective language. And that was kind of like the first spark, which helped us realize we can't do this unless we have a common language. And then it just kind of started to evolve from there. Common language led to common structures, common ways that we go about doing things, the way that we expect things to be happening in our schools. And one of the things that SENIA is filled the gap in is everybody is no longer on their own island in their school. Right? Did you ever feel like that when you were in a school, that you were all alone?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, that's the whole reason that SENIA began back in 2002, right? Is that small group of international school teachers who just felt isolated and alone. And
Exactly.
we continue. Yeah, I think it's so important. Just for kicks, give us an example of one of those terms that you've seen get misconstrued at different definitions, I guess, at different schools.
Well, the one of them is inclusion, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we could sit in a room with 100 people and ask each person to write down their own definition for inclusion, and we might have 99 different definitions.
It's true. Yeah.
So it's a big issue when the whole thing we're talking about may not have a collective definition.
Yeah.
And it's good that we all come with different perspectives. We come from different places. We come from different educational backgrounds, but we have to be able to come together on what some of these things are. And so we heard from parents, especially when they're looking for schools, they thought, oh, we can't look at that school because their website is calling that program that we were at in another school something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have been that it was the exact same program. Or teachers looking for a job at a new school, and they thought, oh no, they don't have the life-centered education program that I used to teach at, therefore I can't apply for that job. Even though in reality, they might have been the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
Mhm.
we're talking about the micro and the macro of language wasn't the same. And then when we start talking about systems and structures, then it gets even deeper and it started to get hairier, and we started to realize there needs to be some kind of international standard that schools that feel like we need a kind of a North Star. This
Mhm.
is, we need to have somewhere we can go to. And at this, before now, there wasn't one.
Yeah. And speaking of the language and definitions, I think one really cool part of the standards is the glossary. So can you
Yeah.
just share a bit about that?
Yeah. The glossary was one of the most difficult things to come to an agreement upon, right? And so
Mhm.
we've had committee after committee after committee go through the standards and especially the glossary um, to get everybody's eyes on it and make sure we have hundreds of different perspectives coming together. And in all reality, the language that we use in this field evolves constantly. So that's
Yeah.
going to be one of our biggest jobs in keeping these standards alive. And it's not a document that just sits and it never changes. It's going to have to evolve consistently. And so that's going to be another committee role, is to figure out what is the disability community asking us to use in language,
Hmm.
and making sure that we're mirroring that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned committees. You
Yeah.
mentioned hundreds of people. So let's give a shout out now to all of the people that helped us. And can you just share kind of how that all came together and how that worked?
It's still working, right? And so
Mhm.
the standards were, created at first, a very small version in this little office here in my house in Switzerland. And then we just started pulling people in that are experts within SENIA, from so many different parts of the globe, with different expertise. And so those committees worked on multiple different iterations of those standards. And like I said, it's going to continue iterating. We'll have those committees come back together annually to review them and say, has something changed? Are we using different language? What um, what are you seeing in your region of the world? Just to make sure that this is a living document. But at the same time, um, this living document from these committees, with everyone's help, is now open source. And so
Mhm.
we wanted to make sure that this wasn't something that was behind a paywall,
Right.
because that is completely against the mission of SENIA, right? We wanted everybody to have access to this and really wanted it to be a roadmap that anybody at any school could access and say, we're working on this. What is the standard that SENIA's put out there say? Where do we compare to that? So the committees even went through the standards and said, where's my school
Mhm.
in comparison to these standards? And there were times where some people on committee said, that's completely unrealistic. That'll never be able to happen in an international school. And
Mm.
we would have conversations about it. Why?
Yeah.
Does it have to do with your location? Does it have to do with the kind of curriculum your school uses? Does it have to do with the people that you serve? There were so many different pieces to the equation. And so it's been hundreds and hundreds of hours of
Yeah.
conversation to get them to where they are.
And they came together covering 5 different domains, from
Mhm.
leadership and teaching to case management. So tell us about the domains and how we determined what belonged in the framework.
Yeah. So at first, there were 9 domains. And then we started realizing there were some things that really overlapped and came together in one section. And um, it it has been boiled down to 5 really cohesive domains. So leadership, management, and facilities is number 1. Supplemental curriculum. What are those things that we're using as interventions when there's pull out things going on? Um, and assessment. Those things all go together. Number 3 is faculty. What are we expecting for the people that are working in student support services in terms of their training? Also, teaching assistants. What are we expecting teaching assistants to do in roles and responsibilities? And then we've got professional growth and development in there as well. And then number 4, we've got identification and case management, which is very particular to specifically learning support, multilingual learners when we're talking about English as another language support. And then number 5, this is the one that just doesn't get talked about enough in international schools, is post-secondary pathways. How are we supporting students that are not going to be able to get a traditional fixed diploma that schools are quite rigid about because of external organizations?
Right.
So within post-secondary pathways, we're also talking about community. How are you bringing the community in to get all the experiences possible? And one of my favorite standards is, how are you holding those organizations that come into your school to high standards to kind of spread this inclusive bubble? So for instance, are you hiring an organization to be your catering organization that is also using inclusive practices?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's really one of the things that I'm most proud of in this, is the hope and the dream that it's not just a school in a bubble. It's being able to spread the need for the world to be more inclusive by putting your kind of where your money, where your mouth is, and saying, we're going to be inclusive and we expect our school partners to also be inclusive.
That's amazing. Well, we know that so many of our schools out there care deeply about inclusion, but they really struggle kind of to turn that commitment into consistent practice. So how do you think the standards can help schools move from those good intentions to meaningful action?
Well, this is why we created a self-assessment, because it's almost like thinking about an individual student. We need to assess where the student is on a regular basis to be able to understand, how do we change our teaching practices to help them get to the next level? So we're setting goals for the student, right? And then this is their present level of performance. This is the gap. This is where we need to get to, and having the student be part of that process. Why can't we do that with schools too? Schools should be able to say, I don't know where I am right now. I don't know what it is and how we're performing, because someone in the early years might have a completely different perspective of what's going on versus someone that's in high school or DP or AP. So it's really being able to say, this is the line in the sand. This is where we are right now. This is where we would like to get to. And being able to look at the standards and say, this is where we want to get to in our strategic plan 3-5 years from now, and then make a plan to get there, and then slowly start keeping track, going back to your self-assessment and saying, where's the progress that we've made? Where do we still need to improve? And being able to do that it's getting down to the nitty-gritty, but it's also looking at the big picture. So it's being able to say, this is where we want to go. And we're really hopeful that this will help create some continuity in schools that have a lot of, it's just embedded in international schools that there's change and there's turnover. But what ends up happening then is someone will come in and say, I want to make my mark. And by having standards that are external, just like any school accreditation, the meat is staying the same. So then it's when a new director of student support services or a new head of school comes in, the school says, this is the framework we're using. These are the standards we're using. And so then it isn't completely new things happening all the time. So it's sustainability kind of built into the fabric.
Awesome. And how exactly do the self-assessments work?
They're online. So we've created this really cool system where all the standards, along with guiding questions, have been entered into a self-assessment virtual system that people can sit down in their committees and say where they are in a ranking of 0 to 5. 0 meaning that's not even on our radar, to 5, which means we think we're innovative with what we do in this standard. And so all 5 domains have their own self-assessment. The first domain for leadership is open for the public. Anybody can do that one. And then if you're a SENIA member school, you can access domain 1 and 2 for free as part of your membership. And then the other 3 self-assessments are at a very low price because we didn't want that to be a barrier to being able to get use of those self-assessments. And we already have one school that's working on all 5 domains in that self-assessment. So that's really cool.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we do these self-assessments, and sometimes I would imagine that schools would be like, oh, we're terrible. There's no place to go because, it's just bad.
Yeah.
Right? But the assessment itself isn't intended to be punitive. It's intended to be developmental. So what's that mean for schools?
Well, it's a new lens to look at an assessment through. It's a growth mindset lens, really. And it isn't, you're never going to see what another school scored on the self-assessment. That's what the self is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't us thinking about, okay, this school's better than that one's better than that one. And there's no ranking system. It's really, where are we at the moment? And, we have schools that are just doing one domain at a time instead of trying to look at all of it at once. Any school can jump in wherever they are. And that was really the purpose of it too, was it meets everybody where they are and doesn't say you have to meet this and this and this before you can even enter a self-assessment.
Right.
So you're right. It's not punitive. It's meant to just meet everybody where they are. And there may be things as standards that as a school, you'll never be able to reach. If you're a school that is in an old chateau, there are probably accessibility things that you're not going to be able to support. And that's the nature of your building, right? But that was the intention, that everybody could get into it at wherever they are in their journey.
That's great. So how can schools ensure that this work reflects the lived experiences of students, families, teachers, support staff, not just what's written in the policies?
That's the hardest part of this, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So we're going to really be focusing at this point on creating different resources that schools can access, where there might be in those resources, there will be, it's on the plan, for workshops to be held where schools and families can work together to be able to understand different perspectives, to understand the needs of your community. There's a lot of great community surveys out there. And so the goal is that they can take those surveys to the next level and make sure that disability inclusion is included in those conversations. I'd love to see more students be part of the self-assessment process. Getting a committee together as they're going through the self-assessment that mirrors the people that this is actually serving, rather than just leadership or just teachers, but having a mixed committee go through this self-assessment process. And so there are a lot of pieces of the standards that are specifically talking about how to bring the whole community together around these concepts and around these needs.
So important.
Yeah.
Well, I know SENIA is still developing the tools and processes that will support schools, like you mentioned. What else is being built? And what do you hope the complete school journey will eventually look like? Eventually.
Well, eventually, our hope is to have as many schools as possible be able to say, we have achieved a certain level at each of those different 5 domains. The goal is for teachers, for instance, to be able to say, oh, when I go to the website of a certain school, I can see that they've achieved a certain level of the SENIA post-secondary pathways domain. Or families, when they're looking for a school and they've got a student that specifically gets services for their child that has dyslexia, for instance, they can see that this school has achieved a certain level in the domain of supplemental curriculum instruction and assessment, because that's very important to them. It's going to be an indicator around the world of who is working on these certain pieces of the equation. So we really want more and more schools to be able to kind of flash this around and say, yeah, we're working really hard at this. And quite honestly, there's a lot of schools that have incredibly good reputations in this area. On the other hand, there are a lot of schools that are doing really great work that don't have the same reputation to rely on, but still should have the same recognition. So that's our goal, to kind of level the playing field a little bit. Just because you don't have a wonderful marketing program at your school, or you haven't been around for 150 years like some international schools have, doesn't mean that you don't have great things happening at your school.
Yeah. Well, and SENIA is so about community. So I did want to just mention that I know that part of our plan is to build a resource of exemplars from schools around the world who are doing the work.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we'll put a graphic in the session notes about this, but we're going to be building we're calling it a library, where there will be anybody can come in and provide examples of and exemplars of what they're doing at schools, and then be able to see what other schools are doing. So the idea was really one of those roadside little libraries where it's take a book, leave a book, or when you stay at a bed and breakfast, sometimes they have that too. The idea was it doesn't have to be perfect, but sometimes, just like our students, we need to show them an exemplar of, or just some place to get started. Because oftentimes when you're thinking about, gosh, we need to revamp our IEP or ILP, and I just want to see what other schools are doing, this is going to be a community hub where people can do that. And that'll be open to everybody. The other part of it will be those resources that SENIA is in the process of developing that are going to be vetted, and they're going to be built by experts in the field that have years and years and years of experience. And those will continue to evolve.
Okay, well, looking further ahead, SENIA is exploring elements such as evidence review, external feedback, possible site visits. So, what principles will guide that future work so it remains supportive, credible, and useful to our schools?
Oh, the research is always so important in this. And that's one of those pieces that there will constantly be a committee saying, okay, this is the newest research, and this is what we need to update our standards to follow the newest research. But these pieces of the equation, when we're talking about site visits, I'm sure our listeners understand what we're trying to say there. And so we're going in that direction, absolutely, because it's all well and good when you do a self-assessment. But we know when you have outside verification, it feels differently. And that's what we're trying to aim for, is having an unbiased group of people come to your school, verify what's going on, and then give support. Sometimes schools can't afford to have expensive consultants come in from halfway around the world to be able to support. And so having people from the region that are experts come and do site visits, number one, it's great for the school they're visiting. Number two, it's also great professional development for the people doing the site visits, right? And so SENIA is really going to be expanding their wings into people that are all over the globe, that are going to be trained up to go into schools and do site visits and be able to verify how the school is progressing, support them as they build a plan and identify goals that they would like to reach, and then be able to support those schools in that journey.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. I'm curious, what if schools are interested, what's their first step?
Well, the first step definitely is to go and look at the standards. Go and see what they are. They're, like we said, open source on our webpage. Anybody and everybody can look at them. And then there's no harm in doing the first self-assessment. It might just be you in your backyard doing your self-assessment, right?
Yeah.
And then the next step is taking it to your school and saying, hey, you know what? This is really critical to our development as a whole school. I want to dispel the myth that this is just for learning support, or this is just for student support services. This is school-wide. This is the whole school lens. So it really is going to benefit everything a school does. And more research is out there that says inclusive schools are not just good for the kids that are neurodivergent or have disabilities. It's actually beneficial for every single student in the school. And if we're going to purport to create global citizens, this is how we do it.
Yes. And that's a perfect way to end this podcast. April, thanks so much for your time today and sharing about the SENIA Disability Inclusion Standards. This is really exciting work. And thank you to everyone who has participated in creating the standards, working on the committees, reviewing the standards. It has been a true community effort, and we're very appreciative.
Yeah, thank you to all of those people.
Thank you for joining us for today's show. For more information, including how to subscribe and show notes, please head to our website. That's seniainternational.org/podcasts. Until next time, cheers.